It's Twitter Tuesday on today's episode of the LockedOn Giants podcast. Your questions coming up next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. My name is Patricia Traina. Happy to have you with us on this Twitter Tuesday. We're going to answer your questions here on today's show. So I want to thank everybody who sent questions in to me. We have about a dozen questions submitted, so we're going to go through all of them tonight and just peck away like we always do. Your questions are just awesome, and I appreciate them. So without any further ado, let's jump right in to the first batch of questions we have. And the first one comes from Ruben Martinez, Empire PR Man, who asks, do you know of any possible free agent wide receivers that make sense for the Giants? All right, Ruben, thank you for the question, for starting us off. I believe Will Fuller is still a free agent. But Ruben, the problem is this team doesn't have money. You know, every week it seems I get a question about, should the Giants sign this guy? Should they do this? Should they do that? They don't have money. And right now this team is really banged up. And I get it. They need help at receiver, but it looks like for the time being that receiver, they're going to kind of stick with what they have and not worry about adding at that position. I mean, other than for the guys that they already have, I believe that's what they're going to do. They're going to just rely on what they have and hope for the best. But yeah, I don't know if there's anybody out there off the top of my head that makes sense from a production standpoint or is any better than what they already have on the roster. Clearly, though, Ruben, receiver is going to be a high priority for this team next year. It's got to be. It's got to be. They cannot go on with what they have and expect to win. And I hate to say it, but at some point, I would not be stunned if the receivers that they have, they lose a game because of their passing game. So, Ruben, thank you for your question. Thanks for starting us off. All right, next up, Texas Wine Lover. Out of the many injured players yesterday, who do you see playing? Okay, I'm going to go off memory here because that injury list is so long. So hopefully I don't forget anybody. I think Daniel Jones is going to try and make it. I don't know if he's going to play, but I do think he's going to make the trip. I do not think Tyrod Taylor is going to make the trip. Taylor with the concussion. It sounds like Kenny Galde is not going to make it this week. That per head coach Brian Abel. Just trying to think who else. There was a long list of it. Mark Lewinsky should be okay, and I'm going to have to cheat. I'm going to have to look at my notes here because I can't remember this list. I'm telling you. All right. Mark Lewinsky should be okay. Aaron Robinson probably will not play in London. Henry Mondo, who was on the practice squad, they brought him up last week for the game for the practice squad, probably won't go. Azeez Ojulari, the jury's out on him. If it's his calf, which is what I believe what was reported, my guess is he doesn't go, which might explain why the Giants added A.J. Klein. A.J. Klein could be an inside linebacker and outside linebacker. So I wonder if that's not why they added him, which, by the way, would also indicate, maybe Ellison Smith isn't ready yet. But I think we have a question about the pup guys and the IR guys later on in the show. So I don't want to get too deep into that. Kayvon Thibodeau should be okay. He had back spasms. Jihad Ward, I don't know what he had, but I know he got dinged. He should be okay. This all according to head coach Brian Abel. Now, Cordell Flott was also injured. He missed the game. I don't think he's going to be able to go. I don't know where Kadarius Toney and Wan'Dale Robinson are. As I record this, I'm recording this on a Monday night, so I don't know what their status is. I think with Wan'Dale, the hope was he would be ready to go by week 5, but That's to be determined. Leonard Williams, who has the MCL, I would say if he practices partially this week, he might be able to go. But, the hard thing about this, to be honest with you, is until I see the practice report on a Wednesday, I don't really have a good feel. I'm just going off of what Abel says. And he's not giving us a whole lot. So it is what it is. He's not giving us a whole lot, but that's kind of where we're at with the injuries. And I'm sure I'm missing other people. And if I am, I apologize. But those are the ones that come to mind. So hopefully I got your question covered. So thanks for submitting that question. All right. Next, we hear from Independent Outsider via Twitter. Okay, especially given Tua's situation, when is the earliest Tyrod could play? What is the concussion protocol? Can Tyrod play to London with a concussion? What are our options in signing back up beyond Webb? Hoping and praying for DJ's health. Okay, as far as the concussion protocol is, it hasn't really changed that much other than they're going to be more diligent with when guys are cleared to return. My guess is, considering the Giants are flying out to London Thursday night, I would be very surprised if Tyrod Taylor is cleared from the protocol at that point. I don't know at what stage he's in the protocol. I think he just entered it, so he would be in stage 1, which is really, testing and establishing where he is as compared to his baseline. And really, it depends on how quickly he progresses through it. But my guess is now when guys get concussions, they're going to probably be in that protocol at least a week. No, rush them back. And just, to double back while I'm talking about concussions, Julian Love, I forgot to mention him in the injury list. See, I told you this was a long list of injuries. Julian Love seems to be, based on what I observed yesterday, and I'm no doctor, but I think Julian Love might be not as bad as Tyrod Taylor. I mean, concussions are bad, don't get me wrong, but I think there are different degrees of concussions. Julian Love expressed confidence he would be back soon. I'm not so sure he's back this weekend. I would be surprised if he comes back because, like I said, the NFL and NFLPA, they have really, tightened up the concussion protocol, and they're not putting guys back on that field unless they are completely recovered from the concussion, as should be the case. Don't rush guys back. We're talking these guys. We're talking the brain. So even though a guy might say, "Oh, I'm fine," no, gotta show it in the testing, and you can't be too careful when it comes to concussions and the brain. So hope that answers your question. Okay, the other question I believe you asked is, what are the options regarding quarterback besides Davis Webb? I would think Brian Lewerke would be the first option the Giants look for. Brian Lewerke was with the team earlier in the year, should know the playbook. I don't know that you necessarily want to bring somebody in who has no idea about the playbook or who, has a basic idea. So my guess is Brian Lewerke would be the guy if Jones can't go, if Taylor can't go. Davis Webb will get elevated from the practice squad. He will be your starter. And I could see Brian Lewerke being quarterback number 2 for the Giants. All right. So thank you for that question. All right. We have a question from @Edenglish. Actually, it's not really a question according to what's written here, but I wanted to say I'm getting excited about this defense. It's not perfect, but it feels close to breaking out. I think Thibodeau is going to have a massive breakout game soon. He's on the cusp. What do you think? Thibodeau, remember, he missed most of the preseason, if not all. Yeah, most of it. So I do think he's still a little wet behind the ears at this level, but he is making progress. I do think at some point it's all going to click for him this year, and he's going to be an absolute monster to deal with. I mean, he's already a monster to deal with for opposing offenses. But yeah, I agree. I think at some point he's going to have a breakout game, and when he does, it's going to be spectacular. So I'm looking forward to when he does. I totally agree with your feeling there. So thanks for that question. All right, Giant fans, we have plenty more coming up on today's Locked On Giants podcast. It is a Twitter Tuesday. We'll be right back with more of your questions right after this. Hey, Giant fans, if you're taking countless vitamins and supplements as part of your daily diet, now there is a single product that delivers 75 high quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. All it takes is one delicious scoop of AG1 by Athletic Greens to get the key elements necessary to support your gut health, nervous system, immune system, energy, recovery, focus, and to slow down aging. AG1 is lifestyle friendly, whether you eat keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free. It contains less than 1 gram of sugar, no GMOs, no nasty chemicals, or artificial anything, while still tasting good. And it costs less than $3 a day, far less than purchasing and storing multiple bottles of vitamins and supplements. It's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NFL network. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/NFL network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm Patricia Traina, and we're doing a Twitter Tuesday. We have about a dozen questions submitted by you, our dear listeners. I appreciate everybody who writes in, who checks us out on YouTube. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day, or if you're watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. I know a lot more of you have started taking to YouTube, and I appreciate that. Please like and subscribe our channel, the Locked On Giants podcast channel, and tell your friends about us. A lot of people are just discovering the Locked On Giants podcast, and tell your friends about us. I'd appreciate it. We're so close to 5,000 subscribers, and hopefully we can get there. I don't know, maybe by the end of the year. I don't know. Maybe I'm being a little too optimistic, but fingers crossed. All right, let's get back to your questions here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Adam Garrison asks, with the lack of production at wide receiver, do you think there is a better option they can bring in, or is waiting for Tony and Robinson the best alternative? Okay, I think we touched on that in the last segment, Adam, but again, they don't have money. I mean, I'm going to keep saying it. You guys keep asking me about who should they bring in. This team doesn't have salary cap space. And Joe Shane, I think, would sooner take from his own pocket, if he could, to create salary cap space than to touch Kenny Galde's contract. So right now, there was a report, I think, a couple weeks ago that the Giants kicked the tires on Cole Beasley, who signed with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers practice squad. And they were only able to offer him like a league minimum. And he told them no. So, that's the situation the Giants are in right now. They pretty much have to roll with what they have unless they can find somebody who's desperate to play and is willing to come in for the league minimum. And, I don't know that there's anybody out there who is willing to do that. If there was, I'm sure they would have brought somebody in by now. So unfortunately, that's the answer. I think they have to kind of hope that Galde and Tony, I'm sorry, they have to hope that Tony and Robinson get better soon and are able to stay on the field, because that is a concern for sure. So thanks for that question. All right. Up next, PJNJ tweeting NYPJA asked about the last play of the Bears game should have ended when the Bears fumbled and a different Bears player recovered it. No, why didn't the referees whistle it down at that point? From what I remember, and I was on my way downstairs when that play was going on, so I was getting ready to go downstairs for post game. But from what I remember, I think the reason why it wasn't whistled dead is because nobody had possession of the ball. It was a live ball, and somebody had to establish possession. So just because the ball was fumbled, it was still a live ball. So I think that's why it wasn't whistled dead. But from what I remember seeing of that play, and I caught it on the TV monitor on my way down. That was kind of a wild play for sure. Um, Gosh, that you don't see that very often. It reminded me of almost like a free for all. So that's, I think, the reason why it wasn't whistled dead. But thanks for that question. All right, next up we hear from John Spielman. Wide receiver separation showed up again while tight end appeared much better. How can the Giants receivers create separation? This becomes another problem for evaluating the quarterback. John, there's a couple of things the receivers can do. Number one, run crisp routes. Sometimes the routes are not the best. They could be a lot better. Body position is another thing that they can do, like, putting their body between the ball and the defender. The coaches obviously try to scheme receivers open, and they've had some success there, but it takes multiple elements, really. The tight ends, I think, are running shorter routes and quicker routes, and they're finding holes in the zone coverage. That's another thing. The Giants are going to really miss Sterling Shepard because he was a master at finding soft spots in zone coverage. Some of these receivers that the Giants have just can't do that, at least not yet. So those are some of the elements I think they have to take into consideration and work on. So thanks for that question, John. Yeah, it's a problem for sure, and that is why the Giants are going to desperately need to bring in some wide receivers in the offseason. So, all right, next up, Pete M. Does anyone keep a measurable stat on injuries? And if so, after 4 games, are the Giants the most injured roster in the league? Yes, Pete. Man Games Lost is a website that I use to look at injuries. They keep a running total. Now, they have not updated yet for 2022. They start updating after week 4. So I'm sure they're compiling their stats as we speak. Are the Giants the most injured team in the league? I know it seems that way, but other teams have injuries too. So I'd be curious to see where the Giants stack up in terms of other teams. We'll probably know later this week or maybe early next week. Man Games Lost should probably have their initial lists. But yeah, this injury bug, what do we have to do? Do we have to do a sacrifice? Do we have to do a rain dance? I don't know. But this is really, really a drag with these injuries. It seems like every year, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who it is or what they do. Every stinking year it happens. So thanks for the question. All right, Giant fans, we still have about 4 more questions left on today's Twitter Tuesday edition of the LockedOn Giants podcast. We're going to get to those right after this. Hey, Giant fans, BetOnline is the only place that offers the best information on the latest odds, contests, and player props for all your sports betting needs. No matter what sport you're into, BetOnline has you covered. Plus, they offer everything you need to know for live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. Head on over to BetOnline today to learn more about the trends and the action. BetOnline, where the games start. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the LockedOn Giants podcast. I'm Patricia Traina. You got a Twitter Tuesday going on here on LockedOn Giants podcast. We're answering your questions. We have a dozen questions submitted by Twitter, also by email. So we've been running down the list, and they're all great questions. I do appreciate the questions that have come in. Just to look ahead here on the LockedOn Giants podcast, Wednesday's show, I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to do for you on Wednesday, but I promise it'll be something good. Thursday will be the crossover show with Peter Bukowski, host of Locked On Packers. We'll get you ready for this weekend's big game in London, Giants versus Packers. And Friday, hopefully, Tana and I will be back with another live edition of Tana and Traina on the LockedOn Giants podcast. I know a lot of you enjoy that. And, I have fun with Chris and doing these live shows because I'm able to interact with you guys live as we do these shows. And it's really cool. So thank you again for tuning in. Let's get back to Twitter Tuesday. We'll get through these last few questions. Andrew G asks, what's with Kenny Galde? What do you think the issue is with him? Okay, Andrew, I'm not so sure Kenny Galde is A, fully healthy. I really have my doubts about that. But more importantly, I'm not so sure Kenny Galde is a fit for what this offense does. Kenny Galde is a 50-50 guy, meaning he's a jump ball specialist. He's never been one to get great separation in his career. His strength has been going up for the deep ball and just the jump ball, if you will, and bringing that down. That's not what this offense is about. This offense is get the ball into the hands of the receivers, let them separate, and let them scoot down the field and pick up yards after the catch. That's not Galde's game. So I'm not sure Galde is a fit for what this team does. That's number one. And number two, like I said, I'm not so sure he's healthy. I really have my doubts about that. I know he had some issues in the spring. I think he had knee surgery. I question if his hip was ever fully healed, that the hip issue that he had 2 years ago, because he did end up on the injury report again with a hip issue last year. And now he's got a knee. So I just think Galde, look, I don't blame him for the contract. I mean, look, if somebody gives you that kind of a contract, you'd be stupid not to take it. But the Giants, I think we can all agree, grossly overpaid for him. A guy coming off injury. I mean, you got to wonder what, I guess he checked out with his physical, but he just hasn't been the same player he was when he was, at that 1,000-yard season that he had with the Lions. So really unfortunate because I thought Galde was going to do well in this offense. He seemed enthusiastic about it, but it just wasn't meant to be. So you live and you let live and you move on when you make a mistake. And I think the Giants are going to move on from him after this season. So thanks for the question. Okay, we have a couple questions from KL. Question number one, do you think Mara and Tish will exercise patience with both Shane and Abel and keep them in spite of potentially bad win-loss records seasons? Yes, I do think they're going to be patient with these guys. I think they have no choice. I'm not so sure they want to keep paying guys over and over, turning over this coaching staff every 2 years. That is not a way to build a franchise. I would like to think ownership is aware of the mess that the salary cap is, the talent issues, or the talent voids, on the roster. Yes, give Shane and Abel an opportunity to straighten all this out because it is a mess. All right. So yes, I do think they will be patient with him. All right. Another question from KL. Is it possible that a team like the Bears, Colts, or even the Jaguars might eat the contract of one Kenny Galde? Probably not. Probably not. I'm going to just pull up over the cap real quick because I want to see who's got what in terms of cap space. Let's see. The Bears have 6.77 million in cap space currently. I think you asked about the Falcons. The Falcons had 7.9 million. Nah. In order for the Giants to get rid of that contract, I think they're going to have to eat some of it. Galde has, I believe, a $19 million guaranteed base salary. There's just no way a team is going to take that off of the Giants' hands. I just don't see it. That is a bad contract. I've said it time and time again. It is a bad contract. Unfortunately, it is what it is. They can't go back and undo it, unfortunately. So Okay, this next question is a multiple choice question. It is from John G. And I'm going to read off the questions for those of you who don't have the YouTube video. He wants to know, which of the following do you think is most likely to happen in the Giants-Packers game? Rodarius Williams comes off IR and plays for Robinson. Gates comes off PUP and plays for Glowinski. Lemieux comes off IR and plays for Glowinski. Ellison Smith comes off IR and plays for Ojulari. Matt Peart comes off PUP and plays for Evan Neal. John, none of those are going to happen for the Packers game. The way it works is when a player is designated for return off a PUP or IR, he has, first of all, with PUP, I believe it's 6 weeks they've got to wait. So the PUP guys, you can throw that out right off the bat. I think they have to wait 6 weeks. And when they do come off, by the way, they get a 21-day window, same as the IR guys, but the IR guys are only gone for 4 weeks, minimum of 4 weeks before they can be designated to return. So none of the scenarios you described are going to happen for the Packers game. Now, how close are some of these players? I don't know about Rodarius Williams. Nick Gates, I know, is getting close. I could see him being activated off PUP in a couple of weeks, maybe even after the bye week. I would say is probably a more realistic time for Gates. Lemieux, from what I understand, still in a walking boot. Probably not as close as we think he is. Ellison Smith, I'm not really sure where he's at because I haven't really seen him much in the locker room. And I haven't heard anything about him, so I'm not sure where he's at. And Matt Peart, I believe he's making progress as well. If he comes off PUP, I'm going to say it will probably be after the bye week, but I'm not so sure. I would think of the two remaining PUP guys, Gates and Peart, Gates would be the one that's probably going to come off before anybody else. So that would be my guess. But again, to be clear, none of the 5 scenarios you presented are going to happen for Green Bay. Just not going to happen. They've got to come off. They've got to go through their 21-day window, show that they can practice, get through a week of practice. So you're asking a lot there. So sorry to disappoint with that answer, but that's the way it goes. All right, we have actually one more question. I think I said we had a dozen. We have one more question that came in that I almost forgot, but thankfully I remembered it. Don asked, with Jones and Taylor both out, might Dable think of using either Sills or Tony, who are former quarterbacks? Of course, it would only be an emergency. No, Don. No, not going to happen. First off, let's Tony get healthy, get on the field, and show what he's got as receiver before we start thinking about moving him to quarterback. All right. As far as Sills hasn't played quarterback in how many years? I get what you're saying. If God forbid, this week Daniel Jones can't play and they got to go with Davis Webb and Brian Lewerke, assuming they sign Brian Lewerke, and both of those guys get injured, sort of like what happened last week with Jones and Taylor. Do you go to a former quarterback? I don't see it happening. No. So I think you would probably see Saquon in there again faster than anything. And at that point, it would be, run the ball as opposed to throwing. So, yeah, that's how I see it. So, all right, Giant fans, that's going to do it for this edition of Twitter Tuesday. Want to thank you for all the great questions. Really appreciate it. I want to thank you for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day, or if watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. And don't forget to make your second listen of the day, the Peacock and Williamson NFL show. Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson give you the expert NFL analysis in less than 30 minutes. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We appreciate your support. We'll be back tomorrow with an all-new episode of the LockedOn Giants podcast. Everybody, thanks so much for tuning in. I'm Patricia Traina. We will catch you again tomorrow, Giants fans.